Our next speaker is Krystle Penhall, an editor and VFX coordinator at WeMat Studios in Australia. A curious and collaborative post-production professional, Krystle lives to solve problems and facilitate high-level creative work. She'll present Where Are the Women? The Importance of Visibility in Achieving Inclusivity.
Good morning, everyone. If she can see it, she can be it, is the affecting catch cry of the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, and it couldn't be a more accurate statement. The visibility of women has substantial impact in the real world. However, what happens when a woman grows up with a love for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, and they don't see anyone who looks like them doing the work? Their perception of STEM is negatively impacted, their confidence shrinks, and the pervasive messaging about women not belonging in the industry forces them out. According to a study conducted by the University of Washington, this feeling of not belonging is due to a masculine culture in STEM. This is the most powerful factor driving the underrepresentation of women. The study breaks down the masculine culture into three main aspects that signal to women they don't belong: job stereotypes that don't line up with women's self-perception, negative stereotypes about women's abilities, and a general lack of role models. Throughout history, women have fought uphill battles in STEM, only to have their achievements ignored or commandeered by male supervisors or peers. Over the centuries, female researchers have had to work as volunteer faculty members, seen credit for their significant discoveries they've made assigned to male colleagues, and they've been written out of textbooks. In 1903, the contributions in the field of radioactivity made by famous scientist Marie Curie were ignored. When the initial joint nomination for the Physics Nobel Prize occurred for her work in isolating radium, only 2 men were listed. If it weren't for the intervention of a member of the nominating committee and her husband Pierre, she would not have received her first Nobel Prize. Lisa Meitner laid the groundwork that led to the atomic bomb. Although she worked with chemist Otto Hahn for many years, when Hahn published their findings, he failed to name her as a co-author. Women of color face significant challenges in pursuing careers in science and medicine as well. When the Nobel Prize for Physics was awarded in 1957, Dr. Xianxiang Wu's name was omitted, even though she had made a substantial contribution to a milestone in physics during that time. Today, the number of women participating in STEM isn't as high as it needs to be. In 2015, women filled 47% of jobs overall in the United States, but only held 24% of STEM jobs. The numbers get even lower when you look at the share of women of color holding STEM degrees, with Asian women at 4.8%, Latinas 3.6%, and Black women holding only 2.9% of STEM degrees. Women face many barriers to entry and progression in STEM. These barriers include unconscious bias, racism intersected with sexism, birthing and heightened childcare responsibilities, more unpaid labor responsibilities at home, and the gender pay gap. Women are both interested in and capable of pursuing and excelling in STEM. However, for women who work in majority STEM settings, almost half say their gender has made it more difficult to succeed at work. Women who work in STEM also report numerous experiences with discrimination. This includes being treated as if they are not competent, earning less than their male counterparts for the same job, experiencing repeated small slights at work, and receiving less support from senior leaders than a man doing an equivalent job. Jobs in STEM are multiplying, and high-level STEM literacy is a way for nations to ensure their economies are competitive. STEM professionals are in demand, with positions in the US set to grow by 8.9% by 2024. But there simply aren't enough people to fill these in-demand positions. So why then aren't candidates being selected from the full spectrum of our population? An awareness of how and why we select and nurture talent must be present if there is a desire to conquer unconscious gender bias and see the true breadth of our workforce. There are hurdles to creating an inclusive workforce, but it is both possible and necessary to do this. The most powerful way in STEM to change culture is to shine a light on a diverse range of people working in STEM. When representation of women is heightened, it leads to a normalizing of their presence in STEM. This reduces the severity of many of the barriers women face and inspires more women to not only join STEM, but to stay. To understand how visibility of women can yield strong results, one must first understand the status quo in STEM. The multitude of reasons why women don't choose STEM actually begins in their early years. A scientific study showed that as early as 18 months of age, children have knowledge of gender stereotypes that only grows in amount and complexity across their development. If you're only exposed to a visual representation of male medical doctors, for example, during early childhood, when you're grown, it's logical to think that you'll only believe doctors are men. In research conducted by Michaela Whatman and Deborah Bell, the pervasive nature of gender bias in STEM was examined using a riddle named the surgeon's dilemma. A father and son are in a horrible car crash that kills the dad. The son is rushed to the hospital. Just as he's about to go under the knife, the surgeon says, "I can't operate. That boy is my son. How is this possible?" If you didn't deduce that the surgeon is in fact the boy's mother, then you're in the majority. Researchers Whatman and Bell ran this riddle by two groups, 197 psychology students and 103 children. In both groups, only a small number of participants, around 14%, figured out that the surgeon was the boy's mother. Women in underrepresented fields in STEM face an unequal education experience compared to men. When pursuing a STEM education, women aren't valued in the same way as men and can face microaggressions. The National Academies of Sciences and Engineering stated that there is evidence that underrepresented students commonly encounter experiences that have been categorized as microaggressions from instructors, peers, administrative staff, and others. This can lead to underrepresented students feeling devalued and isolated, and this can inhibit their academic performance. This is not something that a majority student experiences in a classroom. And unfortunately, it doesn't get much better for women in STEM who actually stay on in academia after college. According to the American Institute of Physics, in almost all cultures, female scientists receive less funding, less lab space, office support, and grants for equipment and travel. There are a number of reasons why women leave STEM during mid-career phase, and the issues they face at work are varied. In the sciences, it can be anything from unwanted comments and weird text messages to missed promotions and direct assaults. Other issues women have to battle are unconscious gender bias, racism intersected with sexism, managing more childcare and unpaid labor at home, and less pay for the same work. This paints a vivid picture of the different barriers women face in STEM compared to men. Women leave STEM because they are fatigued of hostile work environments. This hostility can take many different shapes and can substantially impact a woman's overall career. The most alarming examples I found of the hostility women face in STEM can be discovered in the world of gaming. It is at least anecdotally clear that one reason for women's underrepresentation is that it is an actively hostile and misogynistic space for female game designers and programmers. In late 2012, the hashtag #OneReasonWhy went viral on Twitter, when women in the gaming industry shared reasons why there are so few women game makers today. The responses were shocking, but it's important to understand that the kind of fears women consider before entering or continuing on in STEM are real and justifiable. There isn't a lack of women in STEM because they're not motivated, ambitious, or smart individuals. a marginalized person cannot be blamed for the system that is in fact ostracizing them. The marginalization of women at work is a systemic issue that is larger than women simply leaning in or asking for a raise. It's not about fixing the women, making them more confident. It's really about the climate in the workplace. Advice given by movements like Sheryl Sandberg's popular lean-in strategy takes the overall failure of women thriving in the workplace and puts that responsibility of changing behaviors solely on the shoulders of women. Instead of focusing on changing women, the emphasis needs to be on changing the systems and structures that favor men at women's expense. There is in fact enough room for everyone at the table. Engaging women in STEM conferences and networking events is integral to achieving diversity and inclusion. European business writer Thomas Frostberg argues that including more women in conference planning and participation is not about taking competent men and replacing them with less competent women. Rather, it's the opposite, he says. This is about recruiting from the whole competence pool. Tech conference speaker lineups frequently contain no or few women. In January 2016, Davos hosted an all-male panel on women's equality. In April 2016, PayPal held another all-male panel on gender equality. And in March 2017, Goldman Sachs hosted a 2-day conference on technology where 93% of the speakers were men. Male overrepresentation at conferences is so common, there's even a satirical Tumblr account named "Congrats, you have an all-male panel" devoted to mocking it. Our appetite for entertainment media is insatiable. According to MPAA chairperson and CEO Charles Rivkin, global consumer spending in the theatrical and home entertainment market is in fact growing, with the global box office hitting another record high last year. With more people consuming screen stories then, it's important to consider this impact that it has on options for women. The number of girls participating in organized sport compared to boys is low. But in 2012, archery participation saw a dramatic surge across the United States. This was due to The Hunger Games, the first film in a series featuring a young woman protagonist who develops high-level archery skills. This increased participation led to the New York Times reporting that protagonist Katniss Everdeen was the major cause of waiting lists for archery lessons from coast to coast. Taylor Richardson, a 14-year-old aspiring astronaut and engineer, knew the importance of visibility when she raised funds for 1,000 girls to see Ava DuVernay's film, A Wrinkle in Time. Richardson wanted to make sure that young women of color can see STEM as an option, saying, "This can be me and many girls who look like me." It was beautiful and amazing to see a girl of color protagonist in the movie. The film adaptation of Hidden Figures is a powerful example of how media can help change the face of the space industry for the better, says Kay Sears, VP of Strategy and Business Development at Lockheed Martin. After watching Hidden Figures and seeing young girls get excited and motivated about STEM, Julie Williams-Bride, Deputy Chief Center Technologist at NASA, made sure to prioritize her time to go out and speak to young girls about working at NASA. She said, "We have so many young girls now willing to come through NASA and do internships and just take tours because now they realize that space is something they can do. It's not just for the boys." Having diverse representation in films like The Hunger Games, A Wrinkle in Time, or Hidden Figures provides guidance on what women and girls can imagine for themselves in the future. That just helps break these glass ceilings a little bit more for them, says NASA Langley engineer Debbie Martinez. Danielle Lee agrees, stating in Scientific American that for women and young girls, being able to identify female role models helps them to imagine themselves as STEM professionals. In September 1993, women and girls were introduced to a new kind of hero on television, a medical doctor turned federal agent in science fiction drama The X-Files. Played by actor Gillian Anderson, Dr. Dana Scully was a skeptical scientist enlisted to debunk the work of FBI agent Fox Mulder. In the 90s, Scully stood out as one of very few female STEM characters in primetime TV. She was a beacon to many women and girls who hadn't seen a woman character like her before. Instead of playing the victim or enabling the male protagonist's emotional story beats, the value Scully brought was her intelligence and her strength of character. Scully had a substantial real-life impact on women and girls pursuing STEM. For most of her tenure as Scully, actor Gillian Anderson only had anecdotal knowledge of this impact, citing that, "I've met a lot of women in law enforcement, I've met FBI agents, I've met doctors, a huge amount of women getting into the sciences around when the X-Files was on." Speculation about Scully's effect went on for over 2 decades, with a lack of hard data to prove it was real. Dr. Ann Simon, the X-Files science advisor, became aware of Scully's influence around the 5th season of the show. And while Simon was teaching a 500 Intro to Biology class, she tested this impact that she suspected Scully had. Simon asked her students if watching Dana Scully on the X-Files had influenced them, and over half of the population in her class raised their hands in the affirmative. In early 2018, a report was published that evidentially confirmed the existence of the Scully effect, as it's now officially known. The study gathered data from over 2,000 women and found significant evidence the Scully effect impacting women and girls. When it comes to attitudes towards STEM, Scully increased women's understanding of STEM as important. She inspired regular viewers of the X-Files to major in STEM in college, and she motivated 43% of frequent viewers of the X-Files to actually consider pursuing a career in STEM. The final part of the study examined Scully as a role model for women and girls, with nearly 2/3 of women in STEM saying Dana Scully served as their role model. Her reach spans even further than just STEM-specific roles, with 63% of women familiar with her saying Scully increased their confidence in working in a male-dominated profession. The data from the Scully Effect report proves that representing women in STEM directly correlates to real-world participation. Women need access to role models to admire, exemplifying potential successful career paths in STEM. Without these good examples for women, the narrative around STEM being a hostile place will not change. An effective way of ensuring women consider in and stay in STEM is to heighten the representation of those already working in STEM fields. Within 10 years, the US will see a need for 1.7 million more engineers and computing professionals, but there simply won't be enough trained workers to fill these in-demand positions. With this in mind, companies simply can't afford to be ignoring the perspectives or the talent of half the population. To accomplish seemingly impossible tasks, you need access to the best minds. And the space industry is no stranger to improbable tasks. Not only is expanding the pool of potential candidates the right thing to do, it is becoming critical for the success of the space industry to diversify the skills and talents of its workforce. Otherwise, it won't have enough qualified STEM workers to fill positions. Today, tech talent is being lured away from the space industry. Web giants like Google, Facebook, and Amazon are snapping up engineering graduates wooed by high-paying jobs and a sprawling work campus rife with amenities. The result of this is a graying aerospace industry, one that is losing people to retirement faster than it can backfill jobs with fresh talent. In 1940, Frank Molina, Jack Parsons, and Ed Foreman, the young, innovative members of the Suicide Squad out of Caltech, received federal funding to build a rocket plane. It was this project that saw the beginnings of what we now know as NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. With this new project for JPL came a lot of extra work, so they hired math whiz Barbara Canwright to help out as a human computer. The next 2 computers JPL hired were Virginia Prettyman and Macy Roberts. And not long after she was hired, Roberts was promoted to supervisor and actually allowed to hire for her own team. This was not a typical move in the early 1940s. Most places wouldn't put a woman in charge of hiring and managing her own all-female division within an engineering department. But JPL wasn't a typical place. And so on it went, with JPL comfortably hiring more and more women over the next 2 decades. Notably, engineer Helen Yi-Ling Chow, whose computations led to Jupiter C's success in the late 50s, and Janez Lawson, also an engineer and JPL's first African-American employee. JPL's genesis was based around innovation, risk, and ridicule, and it wasn't prestigious to work on rocket research in the 1940s. This makes it easy to see why JPL's work culture was and is open to women workers. Historically, when a field is less desirable to men due to lower pay, position, or prestige, they aren't as attracted to it, and this opens up more space for women to fill. Today, a good pathway to gain employment at JPL is to secure an internship. While C.J. Giovingo studied engineering, they took up an internship at JPL, which later turned into a full-time job on the Mars Rover 2020 mission. Giovingo says, JPL's culture was a reason to remain after her internship ended. I'm a trans person, they said, so JPL's diversity was a really big, important part for me. I wanted to know that I was not only accepted, but also that I had a community to grow into. JPL is actively building their inclusive workforce through cultivating a diverse intern pool. They pay their interns a stipend to work full-time on campus, which allows people of differing financial means to actually participate. They also work at sourcing different kinds of applicants through job fairs, relevant conferences, and also through minority-serving institutions like the National Society of Black Engineers and Society of Women Engineers. JPL are also working to shift perceptions around the type of people who can work in aerospace. The program coordinator at JPL's Education Office says, a lot of times, one of the biggest challenges we see from students from an underrepresented community is that they don't believe they're eligible to even compete for these internship opportunities. JPL countered this thinking by showcasing a diverse array of faces working in aerospace on their website and across their social media channels. In 2017, for the fourth year running, IBM was listed as one of the top companies for multicultural women. To make the list, IBM had to demonstrate best practices in hiring, retaining, and promoting women of color to ensure that a variety of perspectives are represented at every level of management and decision-making. At work, women of color face not only gender-based discrimination, but also racially motivated discrimination, making the barriers they navigate even more challenging. The first step IBM has taken to become welcoming for women of color is to keep track of their diversity data. By monitoring the number of different types of people IBM have in their workforce, the better it can keep itself accountable and focus on areas it needs to improve. Data shows that mentoring is an important support for women of color and a vital contributor to their success and persistence in engineering and science. But women of color have a more challenging time gaining access to these mentorship relationships. Even when they do find access to a mentor, they must overcome 13 critical barriers within the mentorship relationship, such as differences in race, gender, job level, function, profession, or organizational culture. IBM battled this issue by establishing internal affinity groups to support people from underrepresented communities. And this helps women of color to connect and feel supported. Arguably, the best way to diversify the composition of a workforce is to have a mix of representation on your hiring panels. The positive effect of this is twofold. First, it lowers the chance of subconscious gender or racial bias influencing the hiring manager. Second, it allows the interviewee considering the position to see somebody who looks like them being included in company culture, assisting them with feeling valued and wanted. IBM doesn't shy away from the fact that investing in and diversifying a workforce takes time and resources. But this investment pays off. Catherine W. Phillips, Senior Vice Dean at Columbia Business School, says when teams are diverse, they consider different perspectives, aiding them in solving problems faster and making better decisions. In addition, she says, diversity can improve the bottom line of companies and lead to unfettered discoveries and breakthrough innovations. So in summary, although women's achievements in STEM may not always be attributed or highlighted, women have been and will always continue to be integral to STEM success and innovation. It's not necessary to question whether women's marginalization and discrimination is real or not. It is undeniably real, whether you take into account either the hard data or the hoard of anecdotal evidence provided by women across STEM fields. Women are paid less for the same work, they are called names, they are ignored, they are made to feel like they don't belong, they are forced out, and they are assaulted. STEM skills are learned. They're not assigned at birth. If girls' interest in STEM is cultivated, then future STEM industry will not miss out on tapping this much-needed resource. This is especially important when we consider the substantial growth of STEM jobs that the US will see over the next decade. It is important to understand that the vast majority of women who leave STEM during mid-career phase do so to pursue better opportunities and less hostility in other industries. Attracting a diverse set of people to STEM requires showing them participation is actually possible. When A Wrinkle in Time hit theaters, thousands of young women of color saw it was possible for them to work in STEM. When the deputy chief technologist at NASA saw young girls get excited about Hidden Figures, she encouraged more girls to actually work at NASA. The character of Dana Scully influenced scores of women to work in the sciences and law enforcement. Whether you explore participation in sport, education, technology, space, or public service, the heightened visibility of women works. If a strong STEM workforce is crucial in the modern economy, then the pool candidates are selected from needs to be as wide-ranging as possible. NASA's JPL create their inclusion through actively searching for diverse interns, showcasing the achievements of women, and creating a welcoming work culture, especially for members of the LGBTQIA+ community. IBM demonstrate their commitment to women of color through various initiatives, including flexible work schedules, long leave, childcare, and internal affinity groups servicing specific underrepresented communities. So I want to leave you today with a quote from Verna Myers. She's the recently appointed Vice President of Inclusion Strategy at Netflix, and an inclusion strategist. Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. Thanks. Do we have any questions? I just want to point out that this is just a really small portion of the paper that I wrote, which is about 10,000 words of inclusion fun. And if anyone wants to have a chat with me throughout today, just look out for me. I have pink hair, so I'm easy to see. Thanks.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please tap the like button and also subscribe to our channel to receive notifications when we add new content. For more information about us, please visit SMPTE.org. We'll see you next time.